Hello and welcome to SportWorks Talks, everybody. My name is Christian Page and this is another edition. A little bit special today with the slow relaxing of the COVID rules. We've been able to rejoin and get together sort of almost at broom distance apart, as best we can. But really grateful to have both Emma and Isabella here with us today at SportWorks in Lausanne Olympic Capital. So today's presentation about cycling, about women in cycling, really looking forward, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the presentation that has been prepared for you today. As always, we'd like to say welcome. Please drop in the chat where you're from. We'd love to know where you are from around the world. We know there's many people from different parts of the world as we've delivered more and more of these webinars. So really grateful for you for joining us. We really appreciate your participation. A little bit of housekeeping. We're going to do about a 20-25 minute presentation. Two split presentations, one from Isabella and one from Emma, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions at all as they come up throughout the presentation, please just pop them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. Time permitting. If we don't get the time, we will of course answer the questions and we'll share them through a forum at the end. So enough about me. Here's the Emma and Isabella, so I'm going to hand over to them. Thanks for joining us, Sarah, and thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, Christian.
Thanks, welcome.
So just as a quick intro, I'm Isabella. I'm the Advocacy Manager at the UCI. Also very proud owner of 4 bikes, soon will be 5. A bike commuter, bike racer, and looking forward to sharing the floor with Emma.
My name's Emma. I'm project manager for a project called Fast and Female at Swiss Cycling. I'm not Swiss though, I'm British, but I've lived in Switzerland for 15 years and I'm on my way to being Swiss, hopefully. And I used to race bikes.
Great.
Appearing. Great. Yeah. So as you may have guessed, today's presentation is
we're faster at cycling than we are at presenting.
Can you see it up in the top left corner?
No. So today's presentation is all about the bike, but also it's about freedom. So I'd like you to take 2 seconds and put a picture in your head. What does freedom mean to you? How could you picture freedom?
I think we have to work it off. There we go. There's a huge time delay to that screen. So
great. So for some of you, this is what freedom might represent. But for us, for Emma and I and everyone working in cycling, this is how we see freedom. If I then look at the cities that we work with within the UCI, if we for the cities that we work with, this is what freedom might represent in terms of traveling by bike. For the
Use this presentation. So I'm just going to come in here and say, use this presentation here. Slide to step off on this one.
Okay.
Easier for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick technical change. Yeah. Slides in the backup machine. We're ready to go. This is what happens with the bikes, isn't it? When you get a flat tire,
exactly.
You jump in with another bicycle.
Yeah.
Just put your hand up and turn.
Exactly.
It never happens when I'm out on the road.
Yeah, I always fix my own flat.
Okay, there we go. The bike's been replaced. We're in.
Great. So now, if I think about the organizations that we work with, like World Bicycle Relief, this is what freedom means to them. If I think about cities like Copenhagen, where about 40% of families own a cargo bike, this is freedom. This is how you get your children around the city. If I look at one of the organizations that we recently interviewed, Cycling Palestine with Malak Hassan, this is freedom, and this is what she's working on to make sure that people within Palestine can experience freedom. If you're a keen mountain biker and just love getting out into nature on your bike, this is what freedom might mean to you. And finally, if you're one of many billions of people around the world that use your bike every day as a mode of transport, again, this is what freedom might mean to you. This is what freedom meant to me when I was quite young. And I guess learning how to eat ice cream as I was cycling was probably the best part of freedom. It's something I still do. Now living in Switzerland, this is what freedom means to me. It's getting out into the hills, getting out into the mountains, and discovering the different panoramas within Switzerland. And same thing with bike packing and being able to travel around Switzerland. And this is what the bike brings me in terms of getting around. It's one voice on behalf of cycling. So it's how can we all work together to get more people to ride bikes. It's ensuring that we can pass on knowledge to the 196 national federations, that we can empower them, but also that we can learn from them and learn what best practices they are putting out. Again, such as Swiss Cycling, and that's why I'm really excited to have Emma present the Swiss Cycling Initiative. So it's being able to learn from the national federations, and finally making that link between elite cycling and everyday cycling, and how can we get the competitive sport to inspire cycling on an everyday basis. So one of the things we developed last year, and this was UCI-wide, was a campaign called Ride and Smile, and that's what I'd like to present to you today with the following video.
Happiness. It's hard to define, but sometimes it just comes over you. When you finally dare to take that step and overcome your fear. When you find yourself in one of those magical moments you wish would last forever.
So really
when you feel so good, you have to let it out.
To show that cycling belongs to everyone, whoever you are.
When the beauty takes your breath away.
Whatever bike you have, this is the key objective of our video.
When you can't resist joining the game. When your wildest dream becomes reality. When you embrace everyday life and the pleasures it offers. When you're out there sharing an unforgettable day. Happiness is as simple as a ride. Ride and smile.
So, as you've seen, happiness is as simple as a ride, and whether that's a ride to bike to work, to bike with your kids, to bike for fun, that's the objective. So we all know that cycling has numerous benefits. So whether it's fighting climate change, whether it's reducing air pollution, whether it's reducing noise pollution, contributing economically to the economy. There are many different benefits we get from cycling, as well as reducing traffic congestion. But there are still reasons that stop people from riding. And we won't be going through all of them today. We won't be going through the full list, but just wanted to give you here a few examples of things that may stop people from cycling. So whether it's feeling like they're unsafe on the road, the lack of infrastructures, accessibility, cultural gender perceptions of acceptability, distance, weather. But then again, with weather, we always say it's all about the clothes you wear. So really weather shouldn't be an issue. But what we're going to do here is go through two examples of how organizations around the world, organizations and cities around the world are actually reducing these barriers. So the first one is actually quite topical with COVID. So you've heard the expression, build it and they will come. So one thing that's really been developing within the last few weeks are pop-up bike lanes. If you been following the news, you'll see that many different cities have been, from one day to the next, developing bike lanes. So whether it's in Berlin, where within 10 days they set out a new network, Paris committed to 650 kilometers of new bike lanes, Bogota has built another 76 kilometers of temporary bike lanes, Milan has announced a new plan of 35 kilometers, London just recently announced a very ambitious plan. All of these cities now are developing temporary bike lanes. And actually very happy to announce that in the canton of Vaud, 100 kilometers have also been confirmed. So that is actually being developed right now. For those that use the Lake Road, actually, between Lausanne and Vevey, like myself, you'll be actually thrilled to know that there's now a huge bike lane there. So these bike lanes are developing. And this is because cities are seeing that it's actually key to ensure that people have a safe place to ride, have safe infrastructures. It's a way to social distance, but it's also a way to stay healthy. And this is why the WHO actually put out directives saying that cycling and walking actually are two great methods to socially distance and stay active. So it's actually fantastic to see all of these cities that have actually jumped into this occasion, have been developing bike lanes, have been developing programs. There are additional incentives that are being developed, such as promoting financial incentives as well. But really, bike lanes, in terms of reducing barriers, respond to the question of perception of safety and infrastructures. So really hitting two birds with one stone here and getting more people to bike. And we can actually see within the news reports from the last weeks that the number of people cycling has been on the increase. So that's something that we've been really happy to see here within the UCI. But I'll stop talking now, and I'll pass it over to Emma, that's going to present the other project.
Thanks, Isabella. So Fast and Female project by Swiss Cycling is an example, perhaps, of tackling the cultural and gendered stereotypes around cycling. It was set up by Swiss Cycling, as I said, with the backing of the Swiss government. And the main aim is simply to increase the number of women cycling in Switzerland. The most recent survey of Swiss people shows that women like doing sports just as much as men do. And yet, in road cycling, we see far fewer women with licenses. About 25% of Swiss cycling membership is female, and far fewer women taking part in races and events. Which is not a problem in itself, because, as Isabella has pointed out, cycling is about far more than racing. Cycling is about participation, it's about health, it's about enjoyment. You don't have to have a license and race for cycling to be important in your life. But obviously we'd like to see more women racing and setting that example that elite sport does to young people. And I think certainly I know a lot of people, and I was influenced by elite athletes when I was a kid, and it helped me to take up running and eventually cycling. So we have the backing of the Swiss government, which is great. And there are reasons why it's female specific, because, as I said, there's far fewer women that race. And it's sort of ironic, because the bike has actually played a fairly important role in women's liberation over the years in various countries. So it's ironic that it's now being used, it's being implemented by the Swiss government to try and egalitize sport itself. There's also another reason for targeting women with the project, which is that there is a lot of potential for improvement at elite level, because far fewer women do the sport at grassroots level. It means that few women make it through the ranks to race, and that means that Switzerland can see potential for performing at World Championships and Olympics in cycling. And I think it's something that's quite important, as I said, as inspiration for young people, but it's also, elite sport is a funny thing that I think a lot of sports people take up very young, and then they also finish young, but cycling is a sport that you can be very good at until you're a bit older. And so in women's cycling, a lot of women take up cycling a bit older. So maybe they cycle to school as children, then they give up when during puberty, because there are various cultural reasons, but a lot of girls sadly give up sport, and then they re-find the sport later in life. And that's what I did. And a lot of those women think they're going to take up cycling for fitness. They end up actually being quite competitive, and they don't realise when they start cycling just how much fun they're going to have and that they're going to want to race. And that I hesitate to push people into racing, obviously, but it's remarkable to see how many women start cycling thinking they're just going to ride to work or maybe do a tour at the weekend, and they end up racing. And that was the case for me. I only took up cycling to cross train because I had a running injury. I ended up being sort of encouraged to race by a friend, not very well. I should add that in my very first race was a time trial, and bear in mind that 6 years later I was time trial world champion. But in my very first time trial, I didn't just not win, I was beaten by a guy wearing a gorilla suit with lycra over the top. So it's not like I was immediately brilliant, but I really enjoyed the challenge. And I think that's what a lot of women find, that the challenge of cycling is very empowering. So I think it's always worth telling people that you never know when you start a sport how good you might be later on. Swiss Cycling is keen to develop the potential of the women's team, especially as there are 2 world championships for road cycling in Switzerland in the next 4 years, which is pretty unusual. So as Isabella's pointed out, there are various barriers to participation in cycling, and Switzerland is quite a privileged country. There, most people can afford a bike of some kind, and so we're looking more at the cultural and perception barriers to cycling, which are along the lines of that it's quite a macho sport, that it's not seen as very friendly by some people, and these are all things that are actually myths, because cycling is hugely fun, hugely friendly. There's a great community around it, both clubs and friendly. And so we're trying to tackle those barriers systematically. We're tackling, first of all, the perception of the sport as macho, and show that it's not. And we're trying to tackle specifically women's fear of technical riding skills through connecting people with skills classes, and women's worries about not being fast enough to keep up, which is, again, it's a bit of a myth, because there are fast women and there are fast men, and there are slow women and there are slow men, and it doesn't really matter in the end. But we're setting up women's rides all over Switzerland, so that for some women who want their first experience of cycling in a group to be unpressured, they can go on a women's ride, although they're sometimes quite fast, but everyone gets waited for. And tackling women's perceived lack of skill. So a lot of women are worried if they get a puncture or get a mechanical problem, what are they going to do? So we're setting up mechanical skills classes around Switzerland, which I'm learning a lot, I have to say. All those years of just raising my hand, I want a spare wheel. It doesn't work anymore. And then a very important part of the project is encouraging and enabling women to take on new challenges. So whether that's riding the local pass or taking part in your first race or your first Cyclist sportive. And I always compare it to running, where I think 50 years ago, running went through a bit of a revolution, where it was realized that women could run a marathon without dying or your uterus falling out. And cycling is a little bit behind in that a lot of, there's still it's still one of the most, I'm afraid, sexist sports at the elite level, in that the racing distance is different. And I think that some women think that, you can't ride like men, but actually we totally can. In fact, the longer the bike ride, the more equal men and women perform. And so we're encouraging women to take on their own challenges. And it doesn't have to be a race, obviously. Everyone's challenge is personal, but a lot of people, through tackling their perceived barriers and their limitations, they feel empowered and they feel encouraged. And it's really wonderful to see how that benefits people. And we're combining it with Talent ID, which is a little bit sneaky, but it's sort of a good way to spot talented people when you see people performing well in local sportives. This combines with the Swiss Cycling elite sport model of the FEM, which is Foundation, Talent, Elite, and Mastery. So obviously, the more people we can recruit in at Foundation and Talent level, the more people will go on to be masters. And we've seen that at Swiss Cycling with a few cyclists who've taken up sport very late. So there are 2 great examples of Marlene Weiser and Isabella B, who both took up the sport in their 20s, and they're now, Marlene was 6th in the world at the Time Trial World Championships last year, which is pretty incredible, and she's qualified a spot for the Olympics whenever it next happens in Tokyo. It will happen. It will happen, yeah. And I think the elite, the link, as I said, to elite sport is really important, because elite sport is the inspiration for young people, and it's important as an example that that women and men performing at a high level. It's I think it's very important to show that women, female sports people, are also capable and hugely powerful and inspirational. And it's not just that the grassroots sport helps the elite sport. I really think that the main point of elite sport is to inspire grassroots participation. So it's not the other way around. There's very little point really to racing. There's a lot more point to grassroots sport. We also have links, as I said, to politics and business, and we're trying to highlight how cycling is a great networking tool. It's called the new golf in some countries. I think that's very important because it's a sport where you have to cooperate. Great chance for communication. I think that suffering together always brings people together. So we've got some great backers in industry and politics. And at the end of the day, everyone is a cyclist, and everyone has to start somewhere.
Great, thank you both. You got through your presentations in perfect time.
Talking fast.
Yeah, well done. Shall we run in that video? Because I think that was a really good video.
We have a few videos made by Jan Müller for us, and they're fantastic. We've made portraits of some of the elite athletes in Swiss cycling, so show how the sport and how they deal with the barriers that a lot of women, I think, especially feel around cycling, and I think they're pretty inspirational athletes.
So, ich liebe das Treckeln sehr. Schlamm zu fahren und mal umzugehen. Ich bin die im Training auch immer am schlimmsten drin sieht, aber es macht mega Spass, da durch den Dreck zu fahren und auszuprobieren, wie viel es macht für Leute. Die meisten sind schon erstaunt, dass ich so etwas mache, weil es halt schon im Dreck kommt. Ich kann schon nicht gängig so gut nachvollziehen, Kollegen, Kolleginnen, dass man so viel Zeit in so etwas investiert. Aber ich finde es so cool, dass sie das machen. Ja, es ist einfach cool. Das Faszinierende am Radquer ist halt wirklich, dass es kurz und intensiv ist. Gleich eben so abwechslungsreich. Es hat Laufpassagen, technische Abfahrten. Und es ist jeder einfach 45 Minuten am Anschlag. Und das passieren halt viel schneller mal irgendwelche Fehler, halt irgendwie ausrutschen oder irgendein Defekt. Und ich finde, das macht einfach das Rennen so spannend. Das fasziniert mich sehr an diesem Sport. Es hat mich überhaupt nicht abgeschreckt, dass es mehr Männer hat. Jetzt so im Training oder so finde ich es sehr, oder auch wenn man die Strecke anschaut, hilft man einander und schaut die Sachen zusammen an. Und dort finde ich so Tipps von den Männern und so schon sehr cool. Weil sie jetzt zum Teil viel anders anschauen. Und so den Austausch finde ich sehr wichtig und bringt jetzt mir persönlich auch sehr viel. Ich kann auch viel lernen von ihnen. Und von dem her habe ich jetzt nicht das Gefühl, es ist so ein kleines Gegeneinander, sondern eher ein Miteinander. Dass man beide voneinander profitieren kann. Radquer ist halt einfach meine grosse Leidenschaft und darum setze ich auf das. Ich denke, jetzt in den letzten Jahren hat man wirklich gemerkt, dass es populär ist geworden und dass es auch immer mehr Frauen hat. Also in der Schweiz noch nicht ganz so wie in Holland oder Belgien. Aber ich denke, es kommt immer mehr.
Great. What a great video. Fantastic presentation. I'm now just going to switch back to, there we go. And we're all back on screen. Thank you both so much for your presentation. So I think we've done a lot of presentations about the changes that we need to make to the environment, sustainability. And to me, this whole presentation really speaks to that. I think that the efforts being made within the cities, especially, there's really positive signs that cities around the world are making an effort to incorporate cycling in the day-to-day. And I think it's such a great step forward. And I think the work you're doing about women in cycling is really important. I think it's such an important message. So thank you both for sharing that. We're going to now switch over to a few Q&A. We've got a few questions that have come in through the chat. Let me just bring them up here. So I'm going to go to the first question from Michelle. So the comment is, the infrastructure is not yet developed to expand the use of bicycles as a transport alternative. Only a few cities have prepared for this. How can this Cycling for All initiative help to promote urban policies to improve traffic structures and increase the daily use of bicycles? There's a long question, right? But how are you working with the governments and cities, I guess?
Yeah, so we have a program within the UCI called the UCI Bike City label. It's a label that we give to cities that host UCI events, but also have very clear plans when it comes to promoting cycling in all forms. So there's a number of criteria they have to meet, and it's a network of cities and regions that I basically work with. So what we do is actually share knowledge with them. We organize a conference every year. We ensure the dissemination of best practices between them, and try to support them, invite them to events, and also share or promote what they're doing as cities to promote cycling, because we do see them as examples of best practice that can be replicated by others as well. So within the network right now, we have 14 cities and regions, and what we're really trying to do is try to see how we can support them, even whether it's kind of stepping into a meeting with city officials and having the UCI as part of that meeting, or connecting them with other organizations that can also support them as well. So as much as we're trying to develop relationships with the UN, with WHO, and different cycling advocacy organizations, it's also being able to connect them with people that can support their work.
That's a really active engagement, to think that you're actually participating in city hall meetings or sitting with government officials to really participate and help drive that change. I've noticed recently here too, we were in Geneva a few weeks ago and noticed that the implementation, they've cut 2 lanes down to 1. Around the edge of the lake, and we've got a lot of friends who live there, and they're all saying, yeah, it's fantastic. They're all on their bicycles. They work for WHO, and they said it's brilliant. And interestingly, I know that they're looking to implement some of those strategies here in Canton Vaud.
Yeah, and they have started, and I mean, a lot of that work is actually thanks to Provero. There's Provero Switzerland and also Provero different regional committees as well, and the teams are really pushing and working with the governments and local authorities as well to push them to develop infrastructures. That's
great. So you as both avid cyclists, how have you seen that change? What have you seen, has it been rapid or has it been quite incremental, the changes?
To infrastructure?
For the infrastructure, yeah.
I think it's incremental, and it depends on the region, but I think that Isabella's work of sharing their practice and expertise and values, Switzerland, and it's a relatively wealthy country, so it has the money to develop bike lanes, but there are countries in the world where they don't have the money for research, and then if the UCI can share best practice and give advice, then it saves them a huge amount of the back work in preparing. What I've seen a lot recently is the huge increase in female cyclists on the road, which is really great to see.
Do you think that is also a byproduct of what we've been through I noticed, obviously, with the closure of gyms, and unfortunately, what I've observed is the volume of people that are actually out in the streets, running, cycling. I think it's a positive thing. It can only be good.
I had a hilarious encounter a few weeks ago where I was running in the woods on a tiny footpath, and there were these 2 young people. I don't know, young people in the early 20s. In the early 20s with city bikes. So the kind of thing you just ride to the shops with baskets, hiking over this pass in the woods, like on a footpath with this bike on their shoulders. And it was like something out of the Rough Stuff Collective archive from the 1800s. These Victorian ladies hiking over the Alps with bikes. They were totally lost, and they were having so much fun. And they sort of said, "How far is this path?" And I said, another 200 meters, and then you can ride your bike again, because they were on a totally unrideable. I mean, you needed a downhill mountain bike to get down that thing. It was so funny, and they were having so much fun. And the gyms were closed; they couldn't go to a spinning class. And I honestly think better to be outside on a bike any day than in a spinning class.
And if you go to any bike shop these days, they can't keep up with the demand.
Yeah.
No.
Everyone's buying a bike.
Look.
Everyone wants a bike. It's fantastic. It's
Yeah,
great
we
to see.
went on the weekend to try and look at bicycles for our daughters. And we sort of said, oh, we need a couple of bikes. We've got a couple of old bikes that need help. And they said, sorry, we can change the tires, but that's it. Like, that's all we can do.
Yeah.
So I've got to get the tools out.
But you know what? In countries like Switzerland, most people can afford a bike, and some people can have quite a lot of bikes. I don't even know how many bikes I have. But there are countries where it's very hard for people to get hold of bikes, and it's and where a bike is not just a tool for having a bit of fun, and you need a different bike for downhill, a different bike for uphill, but a bike is the thing that makes the difference between being able to go to school or not, or being able to go to visit a health worker, or the health worker coming to visit you. And for those countries, there are some charities doing fantastic work. So there's World Bicycle Relief, which makes and distributes buffalo bikes, and
Yes.
there's Vel Africa, which collects unused, unloved, unwanted bicycles in countries like Switzerland, in Switzerland, and repairs them and takes them to countries where they are life transforming. So I think that's because I hate the waste of bikes. People buying a new bike, and then what do you do with the old one?
Yeah, no, and well, I've got old bikes, so it's good. I'm still recycling.
No, if you can, that's the thing, isn't it? Reuse, repair, recycle, but
No, I mean, those programs, it would be interesting to put some of those into we'll put them in the post about this presentation, if you could share some of those links, because I think to everyone viewing, it'd be interesting to know how we can contribute to those type of programs. So really key.
There are also local programs that help you to learn how to fix a bike. There are different organizations in Lausanne as well. I did a whole bike mechanic course as well. So I think there's lots of opportunities for people that might be listening, that if they want to learn how to do kind of easy mechanics, where they can donate a bike they're not using, how they can help people that are using cycling as a main form of transport. The opportunities are out there.
Okay, so again, that might be good. We'll get all those links off you, and we'll put them in the post so that everyone can download and actually learn how to fix their bike, which is good. With my 2 young daughters, that'll be one of the first things I'll be teaching them. Okay, so I'm sorry, I've got some more questions. Some great comments here. Thank you, Michael, about breaking down barriers. Here is from Anna Maria. Is UCI partnering with Olympic cities in their cyclization? That's a new word. Good question. Thanks.
I would love to work much closer with them. We do actually have Paris as one of our UCI bike cities.
Okay.
And Paris is doing fantastic work on all levels to promote cycling, whether it's infrastructures, whether it's kind of programs within the city. And I know that they're actually quite far advanced in terms of integrating cycling as a mode of transport for the Olympic Games, which is definitely something the UCI is very much looking forward to pushing, is having it as a form of mobility as well.
Okay.
But would like to do much more if we can,
Okay. So who is watching? Yes, there's more. There's some great opportunities for that. Okay. So a question here from Chantal. Thanks, Chantal, for your question. Are there any projects or ideas to keep young women in cycling to try to lessen the dropout rate? Good question.
I think that part of what Fast and Female is doing is trying to change perceptions to reduce that. So it is a program for adults. So Swiss Cycling also has a juniors and a youth development program, which treats girls and boys equally. But those cultural, I think the reason that a lot of girls give up sport at a certain age when they're teenagers is mostly due to cultural pressures and perceptions, and that's something that we're trying to contribute to changing. But it's a big deal. The image of girls that girls are presented with often in the media, that the only important thing is how you look, and that you look sort of glamorous and well kept at all times. It doesn't go well with sweating and being dirty and grimy. And that's what most sports are like, and I think that's important. That I think the impression that some girls, that we're all given, that women do sport to stay thin and pretty, and men do sport to fight. I really detest that. I think it's very important that competitive sport is a struggle. Even non-competitive sport is sometimes a struggle against yourself. Anyone who goes running will know that it's sometimes a struggle whether you race or not. And I think it's important that everyone benefits from that struggle, because it's through that challenge to yourself that you benefit from sport. It's not from looking pretty, and I think we're trying to change that with the examples of elite athletes, but also some of the participants in our project. We're going to have a series of interviews to show. It's going to be called We're All Cyclists, and to show that you don't have to be fast, you don't have to be young, you don't have to be there, the labels that we put on cyclists and sports people are not needed. So we're trying, but I think it'll be a slow process.
So it sounds like breaking down some of those gender stereotypes. Like we've done some great presentations here about gender equality in sport and the importance of those.
And I don't want to diminish that there are also obviously challenges to men who want to take up cycling. But
sure.
It's because it's such a gender imbalanced sport. I think that's why we're tackling women's cycling initially. But,
that's great. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. So another question from Michael. Is the European model any different from the North American one? Good question, Michael. Thanks for saying that.
In terms of
well,
infrastructure?
In terms of infrastructure or the implementation perhaps of the cities, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, I mean, having grown up in Montreal and kind of seeing the American or North American model where a lot of the cities are actually built for cars. I mean, it is slowly changing and neighborhoods are developing, but the cities have mainly been built for cars, and that you have to move around by car, or the distances are so far that everyone has a car and moves around, and the safe cycling infrastructures are not there. But that is evolving, though. It is greatly evolving in the US. It's greatly evolving in Canada as well. Canada is also part of the list of cities that have come up with pop-up bike lanes. I mean, a lot of the European cities are much smaller, much more compact, make it easier for cycling and walking. So, yeah, it's also in terms of urban planning, you can see the differences as well. But kind of hoping that all of these evolve, make it for everyone to walk and cycle. Yeah.
Do you think? Sorry to interrupt, but do you think there's potential for so North American and cities are generally more modern, so they don't have the old town, which is where streets are narrow. Do you think that means they have more potential because they have more space on the road? So, if you've got a 6-lane highway, you have got more space to add a few bike lanes than if in the old town of
well, even remodeling with Geneva, I mean, there's not a lot of street space.
No,
to take a traffic lane, I thought it was quite a bold move, which is again a good example of how you can implement in a small city.
Yeah, and taking out traffic. But lane of traffic is exactly what a lot of the cities are doing, where they have the space to do that. And I think in Switzerland as well, they're trying to see where, if you don't have 2 lanes, to give one back to the cyclists, how can we make more space for the cyclists as well, to make it safer for everyone.
Yeah, I've seen some clever implementation here in and around Lausanne where they've used portions of footpaths which were probably underutilized, and they've taken bits back of the road, and they've been creative, let's say, but it is nice to see more and more cycle paths.
Yeah, and a few of these cities actually have developed their own guidelines. So the city of Berlin developed a whole guidebook on how to develop pop-up bike lanes in 10 days. So these cities are wanting to share their knowledge. They're wanting to share kind of best practices and show people it's actually not that difficult. Yeah. And Berlin saying, we did it in 10 days, you can do it in 10 days. Wow. So it's great to have those models.
Fantastic. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question, Michael. With them. Okay, we've got time for one more, so we're just going on. So from Gregory, is there any plan, thanks for your question, Gregory, is there any plan to develop a program across IFs and event organizations to promote, share experience and good practice about use of bikes as an event transport solution for event staff as a premier target? That's a great question, Greg.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take
I like this.
I'm writing that down. I think it's a fantastic idea. There are different organizations that are promoting best practices in terms of event mobility. So if I'm not mistaken, Healthy Stadia have developed a guide on how to travel to football stadiums by bike. Wow, cool. They did that for the Women's Euro, and they have developed a guide. So there are organizations that have been developing this, but I will definitely take it forward within the UCI to see how we can create a model, and whether it's for the Olympic Games or for other federations or for our sponsors or partners. I do think that promoting transport by bike is something we can do more with.
I think there's a huge sponsorship opportunity there for some bike sponsor to sponsor the Olympic Games. Mobility. We had the GB team was sponsored by a bike brand that we had folding bikes in the Olympic Village because athletes are famously lazy when you're not racing or training. You don't walk anyway.
No, it's about efficiency. It's saving energy,
Efficiency,
right?
yeah,
Saving
we call it
energy.
efficiency, but you were told to never walk if you could stand still, and never stand still if you could sit down, and never sit down if you could just go to sleep. So,
Right.
but we were told strictly that we weren't allowed to walk to the athlete restaurants area, not restaurants, they call it
Dining hall.
Dining hall.
Dining.
Thank you, mind blank, and we had to recycle that to save our legs. Yeah.
No, that's good. I think there's great opportunity when you think about how restricted travel is around an Olympic city, with the closure of lanes and those. I think it'd be great. I mean, I was thinking about cycling about Rio. I think it was wonderful city to cycle around,
Yeah.
and could have really benefited a lot of the team. But my team
Well,
especially.
the Dutch team always comes with their bikes,
Okay.
and they have their bikes for the athletes to move around as well.
Great. We've triggered some great food for thought there, Gregory. Thanks for bringing that question in. So that pretty much brings us to an end today. So sorry I can't get through to all of your other questions. So we do have a question from here from here in SportWorks. So
Yes,
go ahead. Sorry.
I have a question about road cycling and road racing, and what would stop all of the road races having a women's road race multi-day to sit with a men's road race multi-day? Is there any argument that prevents what should be an equal opportunity?
Well, funny you should ask that.
Good question.
Could you hear that?
So will we
question again? You
Come-
need to repeat it.
come back and we'll give you. Sorry, can you come forward and then we can speak into the microphone? You're here, so so you can repeat the question.
What is preventing, on the calendar of road racing, existing a very strong men's road race calendar, what is preventing all of the races having a women's road race multi-day component and catering for all races?
Great question. Thanks, Guy.
Thank you for the question, which I think we can both contribute on that. So that's actually something that I and many others have asked for quite a long time. I'm not the first, but it's something that has always baffled me, because there are very few other sports now where there is so much disparity in the racing or the competition between men's and women's sport. You know, the football, boxing is way ahead. Running tackled this in the along 50 years ago when a woman broke into the Boston Marathon and ran it and proved that women can run marathons. And yet there still seems to be a perception that women cannot do the same distance as men in cycling. And effectively it comes down to the race organisers who privately own the races. And I and a few others, so I and Marianne Vos and Chrissy Wellington and some others, we petitioned the ASO to put on a women's Tour de France in 2013, which they didn't really appreciate as a gesture, but it was interesting because the only reason they could come up with was logistics, that there wasn't enough hotel space for women's teams. And that's, I mean, if you have a problem with logistics, you wouldn't organise a Tour de France, because it's a real nightmare, I think. So I think when it comes down to tradition, cycling has a fantastically rich heritage as a sport, and that it's quite slow to change. But it is changing, and I think that maybe the current virus problems, which have cancelled most of the races for most of the summer, and led to digital racing as the only alternative, where women's racing has been just as exciting as men's. I'm hoping that when racing restarts, that there is more equality in the racing scene, because I think there's not much reason really apart from tradition. And it's great. It's not that anyone deserves to race, but racing is the example that people see. That is the pinnacle of the sport that people see on television. That's what people look up to. And in my whole career, I used to always get asked, "Oh, you race bikes? Oh, professionally? Oh, have you raced the Tour de France?" And I would have to explain that no, because I lack a certain piece of anatomy that means that I can't race the Tour de France. And it's immensely frustrating, especially as I'm a climber, and it would have been perfect. But anyway, thanks for the question.
Thanks, Guy. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. I want to say thank you all very much for joining us. Thanks for participating. Great questions. For the questions we weren't able to answer, we'll drop them into the Q&A forum so that you can review those on sportworker.com. The replay of this webinar will also be available, which we will share with all of the participants and all the people who are able to register. I really want to say thank you both, Emma and Isabella, for coming in and joining us today. I want to say thank you for your patience a little bit as well, because we had a few little technical glitches. We had to bring in the second bike to keep things going. You did just raise your hand, Emma. I just came in. That was perfect.
Amazing.
So apologies for that little bit of disruption with the audio and those couple of glitches, but I really want to say thank you for all joining and making this possible today. And I wish you all to stay safe and get on your bike.
Yes.
Great. And smile. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for today.